Testing, testing.
Hello? Oh, is this?
Hello?
Okay, we're good. We'll let everybody kind of filter in here a little bit more, but I just want to say hello. How's everybody? Yeah? Cool. So we're going to do things a little bit differently here and kind of strip it down a little bit and have a little bit more of a conversation. And I think what I would love to do is have a few minutes at the end to just offer up any questions for everybody. So we don't have any graphics. It's just us and our faces and conversations. But I think I'll begin. So my name is Lauren Lubin, and I am the Associate Director of Athlete Leadership at the Women's Sports Foundation. And I'm going to be speaking with these two amazing ladies here today. And just to give you a little bit of background about myself and what I do at the Women's Sports Foundation is I feel like I have the best job ever. Every day I get to work with champion and elite female athletes in all different types of sports. And one of the main things that I do is to help these athletes, either who are coming up the pike to be potentially Olympic or professional elite athletes during their careers, but then also athletes who are either competing or looking to transition to that next phase of their life, helping support and advance their careers, not only during competition, but also beyond. And I think that's a big part of what we're talking about here today is, what's that next step going to look like for us, and how do we get there? Because we all have to, move on to new phases of our life. So I'm a former I'm a former student athlete with dreams of being a professional athlete. In fact, I thought I was going to be the first woman in the NBA because the WNBA didn't even exist yet. So that was my aspiration, which obviously didn't work out. I'm a former basketball player for the University of Colorado. And today I am joined by two former student athletes who not so long ago were sitting on this side. And that's why I invited them here today to talk with you, to really talk about what is their experiences transitioning from being a student athlete to now a working professional. So I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about yourself, your name, where you played, what sport you played, and what you're doing now.
Sure. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trudy Patrick, and I am an account manager on the AdCloud TV team at Adobe. First of all, can you all hear me well? I'm not sure that I'm projecting well enough, but I'm on the AdCloud TV team at Adobe. I got into advanced advertising because my first job out of college was at Viacom on the advanced advertising team, where we essentially help advertisers target their ads. I knew that I always wanted to work in media to some capacity. I took on various internships in journalism and reporting and marketing and business and distribution, and ultimately landed up in ad sales, and it's been an incredible journey thus far. I went to Barnard College of Columbia University, where I majored in American Studies and concentrated in media and popular culture, and I swam all 4 years for the Columbia Lions.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. How's it going? My name is Sydney Epps. I currently work for the New York Mets. I'm an assistant in the Community Engagement and External Affairs Department. There, I'm able to kind of I always say like the fun stuff that happens with the Mets. We get to really engage the guys in all the community events that they do with the New York City. They also, part of my role, I also do a lot of the programming that happens throughout the organization. From the community standpoint, we do a lot of different, we work with a lot of different organizations that are community focused, where we try to get the guys involved, as well as besides the guys, we also try to get the community involved as well and bringing them out to the Met Stadium. I'm also a former athlete. I went to Hofstra University. I'm the former Division I women's basketball player. Shout out to my girl Nandy right there. She was my manager in college for the women's basketball team. And yeah, I started as an intern with the Mets and have been working there ever since.
All right, I'm going to keep it with you because for me, it's no surprise that I'm in sports. As I said, thought I was going to play in the NBA, and I'm not, but I'm still in sports. Did you know you were going to end up in sports?
Yes, I always had a dream of being in sports in some way or some shape, some way or how, some shape or form, some way or how. I knew from a very young age that I was passionate about working in sports or being a part of sports in some way, whether it was going to be helping to develop kids from a grassroots level, young women from a grassroots level, or whether it was going to be me playing professional basketball or working for a professional organization.
How about you?
Yeah, so I interned at ESPNW my senior year of college, and I didn't really know if I was going to pursue a long-term career in sports. Like I said, I knew that I wanted to work in media and TV to some capacity, but I am involved in the athletic community. I teach swimming lessons on the side, and I love attending events like these and meeting other student athletes and athletes in general, and just paying it forward.
So we were speaking a little bit earlier, and you had a great story just about transitioning from an athlete to a working professional. Full disclosure, when I stopped playing basketball, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, period. It was like the scariest thing ever. And I actually went and lived in a treehouse in the jungle of Costa Rica. So that was my experience post playing, not many people's. So, what was your transition like? I think it's different now. There are so many great programs and mentoring opportunities. So, what was your experience just transitioning from a whole life of being a swimmer and an athlete to now I'm heading into the working world?
Yeah, so throughout college, I took on an internship every year. Every summer, I did at least one internship. And that experience for me was like waking up, going to swim practice, and then going to my internship, and then going to the gym and doing that day in and day out. And so when it came time for me to be a full-on working professional, I already had that experience from my internships and, knowing what it was like to work in the professional capacity. So that transition was rather smooth, and a huge part of getting to that point and landing those internships was having my network, my collegiate network, my athletic network, networks like the Women's Sports Foundation, where I attended an event where I had the opportunity to land that ESPNW internship. So, my network has definitely played a huge role in that smooth transition from being a student athlete to a full-on working professional.
Yeah, I agree as well. Transitioning from being a collegiate athlete to kind of, where I am today, it was a little different in a sense. I didn't actually do any internships when I was in school. Being a women's basketball player, our time was very committed and dedicated to being an athlete and being a student. So I tried to find other ways to kind of get myself out there, kind of find different groups that I can kind of join on campus or, student athlete activities that I can kind of be a part of. So that way, no, I didn't have that traditional internship experience, but I was able to kind of get myself out there. So I joined our SAC, Student Athletic Advisory Committee, through the help of the push from our academic advisor, and he was like, I think you would be great for this role, and I was like, I don't really know, like it's not really my thing, but it kind of got myself out there, it got me out of my comfort zone. I was able to kind of be a part of that organization, and then from there, make connections with our athletic director, who then put me in front of the national Student Athletic Advisory Committee, and then from there, being in a room with Dawn Staley on the women's basketball committee for National SAC. So, no, I didn't have the traditional internship experience, but, kind of putting myself out there, making it known that I still wanted to, put myself in a room where I'm able to network and build relationships were huge for me. And so being a part of SAC was mostly like an internship for me.
Are there any SAC members here today? I saw some hands go up. I think you both touched upon really what we want to talk about, which is network and community and building your tribe. It is so important. And, oftentimes when we hear the word networking, it feels very overwhelming or daunting or the great unknown or a lot of work, right? And somebody like myself, you wouldn't believe it, I'm an introvert. So for me to be out there networking, feels like, oh my God, that seems like a lot of energy for me, or even uncomfortable. So I want to talk about, what networking is like, your processes of building your team. And I think for me the best way that I have approached networking is as an athlete. I see my network as my team. So can you talk a little bit about those early stages of what your networking was like, and any tips that you can offer?
Yeah, so I like to think that I've been networking since I was like 5 years old. Like, I've been swimming my whole life, and the same people who I grew up with, who I had swim practice with every day, day in out, the same people who I had classes with throughout high school and college, those are a part of my network. That is my foundation. They are a part of me ultimately. So I like to think of networking as not something that you have to go out and get, but something that you already have and that you hone in on as you grow throughout your career.
I agree. I think a lot of you women here are already building your network without you even knowing it. As Trudy mentioned, if you are an athlete, building a network with your teammates, someday you guys aren't going to be athletes at that point, or maybe you will continue your career. And so you have to reach back and see what your teammates are doing, what your coaches are doing. If they're not still, doing the same thing, I think building your network is huge. I look at it as kind of peeling, like, look at yourself as if you're an onion, right? And you peel it back. You have layers. So a part of those layers, you're building your network, and you have your network within the layers that you already have as your onion, I guess you can kind of say.
Yeah, I think you both, have led me to the next point, and what I want to talk about is, when you approach networking as if these are your team, these are your teammates, right? So your network are people who are there to help you and support you, and be your cheerleaders. So, like you said, you think, have viewed your network as something that you've been doing since you were 5, and the truth is we all have been doing it. So, can we just talk about, because this is something we talked about, kind of on our own, the importance of maintaining our existing networks that we have? Why is that so important, and what can that do for you now and moving forward? And I'll open up to whoever wants to take the lead.
Yeah, I'll start with like short term. So when you meet someone, you're building that relationship as soon as you meet that. So starting off with a good first impression. So having a good first impression, right? And then once you meet these people, how are you following up? So I think it's so important that when you are trying to maintain a relationship, the follow-up is so important. So whether it's shooting a text message if you have that kind of relationship, or an email, or writing a handwritten letter, I think that's huge. Working with the Mets now, we were in the process of hiring an associate, and the biggest thing that we checkmarked was, oh, this person wrote me a handwritten letter. I think, that's huge when you're looking to kind of build a relationship, maintain a relationship, is how you're following up initially.
Yeah, and to kind of build off of what Sydney said, continuing to follow up in the long term is just as important as those short-term follow-ups. So if you build a strong connection with someone, it's good to like check in with them, like know their birthday, send them chocolates, say, hey, remember me? We had this conversation a while back. Would love to catch up. Like, make sure that you're staying in touch with people. And LinkedIn is an incredible resource. I highly recommend, if you don't have a LinkedIn, like, make one and, stay in touch with those people. Pay attention to the posts that they like and that they comment on and that they're making themselves, because that's how you continue to stay in touch in the long term.
Right. And one thing I'll also add is that, sometimes you might follow up and you're saying, well, this person isn't reaching back out to me. We had a great initial conversation, but after that, they're not really following up with me. So don't give up. Keep following up. I've literally have met people and, wrote them. We had a great conversation and then hadn't heard from them within 2 years, and I'm still following up just so that they remember who you are. And they know, they're like, okay, I didn't get a chance to respond. A lot of times you're meeting executives, you're meeting higher ups, and they're very, very busy. So, a lot of times they don't have the opportunity to always just constantly like check in on your emails and everything, but they're watching. Even though they might not respond to you, they are watching, and they notice that you are reaching out.
That's a great point, because I have to say, I feel like I work 8 days a week sometimes, and oftentimes I'll start my day thinking I'm getting ahead of my emails, and before I know it, my email list has just gone like that. So the follow-up and how important that is, just to send, even if you haven't heard from somebody, just the reminder of, hey, I'm whatever that email is, when that hits my inbox and I see it, my first thought always is like, oh my God, thank you for emailing me. Because it can get buried sometimes. And especially the more busy we all get, just having that quick little reminder at the top of your inbox is so important. And then I'll immediately shoot an email over saying, thank you so much for reminding me, or thank you for following up. And it means a lot. So that's a really good point. I think another thing that I just want to add to that, and I actually have had the privilege of going to a few of these events just celebrating International Women's Day, both today and yesterday. And there was a great story, and if you don't know her name, you should know her name. Her name is Renee Trinado, and she is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the MLB. And she's doing amazing things for women in sports, women in baseball, and just like an overall badass, so just know her name and look for her. But she was telling a great story yesterday about how she got to where she got, and you never know the connections you're making in the current moment, that they can be a part of your community and your team, and how important the follow-up is. And she got into a heated discussion over the Knicks and how they're going the wrong direction, and she's going back and forth with this guy, and they're pretty much shouting at each other. And by the end of it, she was like, all right, jerk, and leaves. But I think they exchanged, emails and contact information. Long story short, 6 months later, through follow-up, he's like, I think I have the best position for you. And that was her entry point into sports, which is, led her to where she is today. So it's just a great example of, A, you never know who you're talking to. B, sometimes people that we don't think are really a part of our team really are a part of our team, and how important it is to just, follow up. I think that's the best, the key word is follow up. So the next part I put a big star next to, because I think it's really important. It's something that I wish I knew when I was, your age, and that is, when we look at our network as a team and we see ourselves as a teammate, what's so important is to recognize your skills and your strengths, and oftentimes, what your role is. And so as an athlete who's transitioning from being an athlete to a professional, we hone in, we develop all these skills as an athlete that really can be translated to the workplace. But oftentimes we don't make that shift in our minds that, oh my gosh, I've spent my whole life being a leader, or building, being responsible, or problem solving, multitasking, all of these different things. And so oftentimes we can look at our peers who have been doing these, had all these opportunities or internships, who we think we should be in a work setting to do these things, but in reality, they are translatable. So can we just talk a little bit about repurposing some of our skills and the language that we can use, that when we're building out resumes, or, we're making a connection and building our network, you can say, hey, my name is so-and-so, I've done X, Y, and Z, and it can be how it's applied to the workplace.
Yeah, so some of the greatest skills that I have been able to implement in the workplace now are, one being time management. Like, being a swimmer, I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to go to class, and then back to practice, and then lifting weights and class in between. It was like a whole lot to juggle. And as an athlete, that's something that is critical to being great at your sport, that is totally transferable to the workplace, right? When you're in the office and you have to manage various meetings and calls and work, it's very, very transferable and important. Another important skill that I learned as a swimmer is how to be a great teammate, right? Being a great teammate is transferable to the workplace, because ultimately, at the end of the day, if your team fails, the whole, if one person on the team fails, the whole team fails. So just being a team sport, if someone's, staying late, if someone's struggling, making sure that you're there to support them in the same way that you would when you were an athlete.
No, I agree. All of those are amazing, and I think, Trudy said that they are transferable, but I also definitely think passion. Bring your passion. You know, all of you guys in here, in some way or form, you have passion for something. So I think it's so important to instill, you know, be yourself, bring your passion with you when you're entering into a new work environment. I also think being observant is very important. As athletes, you know, we're constantly learning plays or, you know, learning how to, you know, different movements and everything like that we're doing within our sports. So being observant and kind of, you know, looking at what's kind of happening around you. Okay, all right, I take it in. Now I'm able to kind of implement what I've noticed and attack it with vigor. I think that's so important.
Yeah, and those are all great points. And I think it's being able to look at ourselves and everything that we've done and say, you know, what have I learned playing? And write those down and then be able to assess them as, wait, these are all amazing qualities that I'm bringing to a group. You know, you're bringing so much value. And again, this was something that I was completely blind to. Like, I thought when I was walking into my first interview, I'm like, I don't know, I've never done any of this. And they're like, wait, no, you've done all of these things. So, you know, it oftentimes, being an athlete and being a student athlete, you oftentimes have the leg up on, you know, a lot of your peers. And it's just, you know, recognizing those things. One thing that I want to say, and I'll let you talk, is you said observe, and I think the other part of that is listen, you know. Does anybody want to talk about that a little bit?
No, I agree. I think listening is huge. As leaders, a lot of times we like to go ahead and, like, you know, do things right away and just say, okay, I got this, I can do this, just being a natural leader. But I think sometimes it's good to kind of take a step back, be a follower in a sense, where you're able to kind of listen, take in the things that you need to kind of, you know, do to make your role as most successful as that it can be. So when you're in your role, listening to who, you know, those who have come before you, you know, this is a new environment that you're in. So being observant, listening, I think is very important when you're kind of getting into a new role.
Yeah, definitely.
Is anybody from the Big East here? No? Okay. Well, the commissioner of the Big East, her name is Val Ackerman, and she's also has a long history in basketball, but she was giving a talk with David Stern, who's the former NBA commissioner, who has done so much for women in sports as well as the NBA. He's one of the biggest advocates for diversity, and he's on record saying, if you don't diversify your company, then you deserve to go out of business. So I agree with that. But he is a big talker about, you know, when you start something new, how important it is to observe and to listen. And I remember hearing him talk and how important that was. Okay, so do you have any final thoughts that you want to say before we open it up to questions?
Yeah, so I would say just be true to yourself. Like, I know that sounds so cliche, but if you know yourself when you're starting off and you know your key values and who you really are as a person, and like you know the work that you put in on the field, in the classroom, throughout your whole life, just leverage that in the workplace and know that you've something to bring to the table every time.
I agree. And then also, I guess I would just leave you guys with this, is just where, you know, even though you might not know where you want to be right now in this current moment that you're in, just keep doing the things that you're doing. Like, you guys are amazing. You're here. Like, Trudy, we were talking about, so we were like, they're here on a Saturday afternoon. You guys could be anywhere, but you're here networking, building your tribe, and also just kind of really honing in on what you guys are great at. So keep doing what you're doing. You're in this room for a reason. If you weren't here, then, you know, you wouldn't be where you are today. So just keep doing what you're doing, and stay positive. I think that's the biggest thing, is have fun with what you're doing, stay positive, and know that, you know, no matter what route you take, the outcome will be, you know, successful once you put that energy out there. So the energy that you put out is the energy that I think you'll receive.
So I'm going to pass around and walk around with this microphone, but are there any questions? And I'll give you the microphone and nothing's really off limits, so you can ask. Yeah. Well, not everything's off. I mean, not nothing, but most things.
So I know you both said your transition was pretty smooth, but working out is such a huge part of our lives. So I was wondering if you struggled at all to find a new routine around working out or a new physical outlet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my entire life. Being a basketball athlete for since I was 6 years old, and then having to transition and say, okay, got to do normal workouts now. It's been very hard. Like literally, I struggled with it, but kind of, finding a routine. When you go to like literally the first 3 months after playing, I did absolutely nothing. Nothing. I didn't touch a ball. I didn't work out. I didn't run. I was like, oh my God, this is a moment for me to just breathe, right? But now, after the 3 months, I was like, okay, I got to kind of start working out. So honestly, it's just kind of, I take bits and pieces of what I had from when I was an athlete, and I try to, put it in there. Obviously, I'm not working out as hard as I was, but I'm a big health and wellness advocate, so I think it's so important to, kind of continue, kind of keeping a routine, I think is very important as an athlete.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely building that routine. It takes time to figure out, but once you get it down pat, you're good. Like I took Zumba classes, which is really, really different from swimming. But it was something that I loved and that I really enjoyed, and that was a great workout, and I'm a huge advocate for Zumba.
Yeah, I think trying new things is a big key too.
I transitioned sports, so now I'm a marathon runner, which I wouldn't recommend. I should have done something like maybe a spin class. But I found that I took a lot of time off, and then that, athlete kind of kicks in, that fire, like I got a taste of blood, and I was like, uh-oh, here I go again. And, I transitioned sports, and I fell in love with a new sport in my 30s, which I never thought I would do. So, once an athlete, always an athlete. Did I see one over there? Yeah.
Hi. I was wondering if both of you can talk about some challenges you face just in your job, whether it was being just new and having to learn a lot of things, or just having something difficult happen in the workplace, and just advice you have.
Yeah, so I can speak to that because I actually just started my role at Adobe fairly recently, maybe 3-4 months ago. And at first, it was a lot. Like you're meeting new people, you're learning new processes, new programs, like a whole new workflow. But I would say just take it one day at a time. Even though it can be a little overwhelming at the beginning, just make sure that you're taking your time. Like Sydney said, you're listening, you're observing, you're learning, and just taking it day by day.
Yeah, I agree. I guess when I started out as an intern with the Mets, because my process was I started out as an intern, did an internship for 6 months with them, finished graduate school, and then came back as a full-time employee. So I guess as an intern, I was literally thrown in the fire, had never done any of this stuff that, they were asking of. And, I had to play it cool. I knew kind of some of the stuff that I was doing, but a lot of it was literally you pick it up as you go. So, when you're faced with challenges, I think the biggest thing is to ask questions. Ask questions. If you don't know something, they're never going to, not want you to ask questions. So I think that's huge when you first start out, is to ask questions. And then that kind of helps to alleviate some of the challenges that you kind of face along the way.
I think it's also okay to not know and learn along the way. And, there's, statistics out there, even for women who are looking to potentially, submit their resume for a position, that sometimes they'll have 7 of the qualifications and still not feel as if they know it all. And won't apply for the job, whereas men will have 2 qualifications, be like, yeah, I'll figure it out, and apply for the job and get the job. So, oftentimes it's, we're never going to learn it all, and things shift, and it's just being able to put yourself in there and sometimes say, hey, boss, I need a little bit more information here, this isn't working, or whatever that is. Yeah.
Right, and I think also doing your research. I think, when you're thrown a task your certain way, I think doing your research is so important. So as much as research as you can do. I know for my boss, when she throws something my way, I try to do as much research as possible so that when I go back to her, I have questions. She can ask me questions about what's going on. It's huge, yeah.
I just would like to know if you have like a specific or had a specific tactic how you approach a networking event, like just to network the most efficient, I guess. Because you already talked about like how you see networking in general, like but like going to an event, like what were your thoughts before coming to it or like afterwards doing it?
Yeah, so let's take this event for example. You know who the speakers are in advance. You hopefully read their bios, know a little bit about their background, search the web. Were they featured in an article recently? Did they make a post on LinkedIn? Like, do your research, as Sydney touched on in advance, to make sure that you feel like once you're in the room with that person, you have a talking point. Hey, I saw this about you. Can you talk more to that? And also just like be confident. Know that you have something of value to say to the people that you're networking with and to the people that you're meeting. That's really important.
I also say introduce yourself. I think it's so important. If you're sitting at a table, it's kind of awkward. You don't know really what to say. Just, hi, my name is so-and-so. And then you start to build that conversation from there, and you never know where it may lead. A lot of times that's I'm so awkward when it comes to like being in spaces like this or kind of like being the first one to make the conversation kind of happen. So a lot of times I'm kind of awkwardly sitting there like, okay, hi, my name is Sydney. And then I introduce, obviously, we kind of start to build a connection. I think when you have like something to kind of just relate to, being relatable, I think is, important as well. So find something, that they have an interest of doing, and then see how it can relate back to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk and walk to the next question. But I think one of the things that I've used, because, I think one of the most important things is getting that business card, particularly with somebody you want to make the connection with or follow up with. So for me, the practice that I use is the first thing I do when I introduce myself, and even you just walk right up to them and introduce them, is just give them my card, because oftentimes that prompts them to give you their card. So for me, it's just a step that I always take. Hi, my name is Lauren. Here's my card. Women's Sports Foundation. And it just kind of opens up everything, and then you'll find that majority of the time they'll either give you their card or not, but now they have your information. So it's just a nice step when you go into new settings. Just that's kind of like my toolkit.
Hello. So I'm majoring in a STEM field, and when my school puts on like networking events, especially for athletes, I find that a lot of the majors there are finance and advertising and majors that really don't apply to mine. So what would be your advice in networking in those situations?
I would say find different events that do target what you're looking for. So yeah, it might not be happening at your school, but I'm sure that there are other networking events focused on STEM and where you're able to kind of get yourself in the room, just like you're here today. So I think I think go there for practice to just kind of practice interviewing in an interviewing setting, kind of being in the room with people who are in that space. Went through the same thing at my university where they set up events and everything. But I think taking the initiative to kind of go out and find those events where it is specific to what you want to do is very important as well.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, so when I was in college, I was like the career fair queen. I went to every single one, regardless of the field that it was, and I think that's fantastic practice for just interviewing, for meeting new people, for practicing your pitch. And in regards to finding companies that are in the STEM field, I think you don't necessarily have to go to an event in particular, but you can also just reach out to one person or a group of people who you think may be a great connection to, grab coffee with or grab lunch with. And I would be happy to talk to you about about Adobe in the tech field afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful point, because I think it's important to find your niche, whatever that is, and you know that. But then also, some of the best connections I've made were not in the in an event that had anything to do with sports. But it just so happens that so-and-so is connected with so-and-so, or, oh, my daughter played sports and here's this person. And I think it's just about being out there more, and just talking about what you're doing and what you're passionate about. You never know the connections that you're going to make. And I've made some incredible ones when I was at a film function that had nothing to do with anything, and it just so happened. So, that's a wonderful point, and so many people are looking for so many different things all the time. Any other questions? Yep. This is my training for today.
After all your years of experience playing sports, have you ever debated coaching?
So I teach swimming lessons on the side. I'm not quite coaching. I do love to teach swimming and to give back to the sport that gave me so much. I can't say that was particularly a thought that ever crossed my mind, but I do like to still be involved with my sport to some capacity.
I agree. If you ask my college coach she'll be like, "You should coach." I'm like, "No, I don't want to go that route. I would never want to coach." But I guess as I've gotten older, and now that I'm out of the sport, in a sense, I miss it a lot, and it's kind of been it's my heart is kind of telling me you should probably start I want to give back. I want to start maybe coaching younger kids from the grassroots level and kind of being a mentor, a role model for these kids, because they're the next up. So, that's something of interest that, maybe down the line that I would eventually want to do.
Hi, my name's Danya, and I was just wondering, the transition from college to school. I feel like or college to work, when you're in school, you have a lot of things going on. You have a lot of different events and clubs, so there's always something new. But when you enter into the work field, does it ever get really mundane, a 9 to 5, super routine? Does it ever get boring? How do you keep your life interesting and change it up?
Yeah, I'm definitely going through that phase right now, in a sense where I'm one of those people, I really like to be hands-on and really make sure that I'm doing different things. I don't really like to kind of do the same thing over and over again. So for me, definitely trying to network more has been something that I've even been working on, trying to build my, going out to different events, meeting new people. So definitely, I would say it's mostly a lot of times 9 to 5 if we're not doing events and everything like that. But I think it's the determination and the motivation to kind of want to take yourself out of that box that you're in and kind of make yourself not comfortable. I think the biggest thing when you start to work is the comfortable phase. I've never really been comfortable. As an athlete, you're not comfortable. You're always thinking about, okay, am I going to play this position? Try to figure out if you're going to start. It's always something. So, I guess as being now in this position that I'm in, it's okay, I'm getting comfortable. And at that point, I'm all right, so what kind of networking events can I do? What kind of different things can I do to kind of keep myself in the loop and kind of up to date on what's kind of going on around me?
Yeah, and I think, in addition to attending events outside of work, in your office, I'll give myself as an example. So I'm on a sales team. I think it's important for me to know about all facets of the business. I want to learn about the data side. I want to learn about the engineering side. There are materials out there within our SharePoint that if I ever get bored, if I ever feel like I'm not doing enough, I'll learn more about some other aspect of the business, because that's super important, just knowing how the entire ecosystem works at large.
I agree. I think it's huge to network within the company that you're in as well, especially if you start out as an intern, finding, you might have an interest in one field, but talking to different people who have been there for a long time, I think is huge. I think that was something that was crucial in my internship. I tried to, speak to a lot of different people in different positions. And ultimately, when I started working with the Mets, I ended up working with a lot of these same people in different capacities. So it's huge to kind of, yes, you'll be in your department, but networking amongst those who are within the organization is huge.
I'll get you in a second. I think that also builds upon we talk about how important, how I'm sure you've talked about all day, like mentorship, having mentorship. But then when you network upon your team, you start to build sponsors. And when you start to create these personal relationships, and truly not just like, oh, how's your day? Like, go to lunch or, grab a coffee or grab a drink, whatever that is, these are people who will go to bat for you. So if you want a promotion or you want to pitch a new idea that might be a little crazy, you're going to have a couple of people who are like, you know what, I trust this person or I vouch for this person. So it's a great way to build camaraderie within your team, and also get to know people. And then, when you feel like kind of stepping up to the plate or taking a little bit more responsibility, you can fall back on people who are going to be there for you. So, it's just, I think, to answer your question, like if there are ways that you can infinitely break up, the monotony of the workday just by, being more proactive and whatever that may be.
Trudy, so you just said you're a part of the sales team at Adobe, and Sydney, you're part of, obviously, community engagement. Do you guys think within those areas of your careers, it's opened your eyes to a bunch of other things, like even outside of sport and technology?
Oh, yeah. So when I was in college, like I mentioned before, I knew that I wanted to work in media and television to some capacity, and somehow ended up at a tech company. And that's because I was exploratory in reaching out to people and building my network of figuring out what the various, I guess, fields were within media that where I could potentially, pursue my professional careers within. And so ad sales, not something that I ever thought that I would ever be doing. But a lot of the skill sets and a lot of the inner workings within various fields are oftentimes intertwined. So I recommend just learning and talking to people and hearing people's stories about what a job or what a field really, really is and what it can be.
Yeah, I guess I did a lot of community service work when I was in college. So it was, something that was always a passion of mine, was doing community service work. I kind of always wanted to do like player development, be in a player relations type of field, whether it was, honestly, it was basketball for me. Basketball was like where I wanted to be. And then, obviously an opportunity came up where I was able to, through the Women's and Sports Foundation, went to the athlete leadership connection that they had, and was able to, it's crazy because I was supposed to interview with someone completely different. And then I ended up interviewing with someone from the Mets and was able to kind of come in, and they were like, we have a community relations role. I was like, okay, that sounds fun. That sounds cool. Didn't think I would ever be in baseball. Wasn't sure that community relations was something that I was ever interested in. From a work, I didn't even know that they had so many opportunities from a community standpoint that you can, be a part of. And so, now I had the best of both worlds. No, I wasn't in basketball, but I was a part of a sports organization that still brought the passion, to have that I had, as well as, working in community. So a lot of the things I do is like very heartfelt. I'm able to kind of connect with people. For me, the biggest thing I always say, I don't really know what I want to do at this moment, but I will say that I need to do something that I'm passionate about. I need to do something that I'm able to give back to others. I want to do something where I'm able to kind of be relatable and be able to be some sort of leader, like in a leadership role where I'm able to kind of hone in and help people out. So that was something that was important to me when finding a different role. I think it's important to kind of, when you're going into a working environment, do they align with your passions? Do they align with, who you are as a person? So this ended up kind of being the perfect role for me. And so currently I'm really loving what I'm doing.
The moral of that story is you owe me a percentage of your paycheck. No, and I think just to put a cap on that too, this is a room full of leaders. We all have big goals, right? We all want to lead. And so many C-suite women start in sales a lot of times with no idea. And it's simply, oftentimes in order to have that C-suite position, you have to know how the whole company runs. So it's almost a blessing at times to be able to work your way up through a company and sometimes even transfer within a company, simply to understand how that company works. So it's okay not to know.
Yeah, and one thing I will say is, like, like I always knew I wanted to work in sports in some way. Didn't know how I was going to do it, but I wanted to get my foot in the door. So even if you feel like, okay, I already had like 4 internships, like if it's somewhere that you know that you want to be, take that internship. You never know where it may lead. A lot of people with the Mets organization have been there since they were interns. Like we have a vice president who is the vice president of venue services. He started out as an intern and has been there ever since. So a lot of times in sports, it's hard to get in, right? So you might not necessarily be starting somewhere where you want to start, but it might lead you to where you might end up or want to be when you end up.
We have a couple more minutes, but we can do another question or two if there are any hands for these amazing last call. All right, well, let's give a round of applause for these 2 amazing women here, and thank you all so much.